Oh, hello! I'm Tootight Lautrec, and this is Literature Alley, your back street off the beaten path, under the radar and beyond the pale place to sparkle up your senses while we talk about all things literary. And today, we're going to be talking about me, or at least a version of me. I have what some might call an announcement, and others might call a confession. When I started this channel, it was devoted solely and completely to poetry. We discussed poetry, I recited poetry, I've done poetry lip syncs, but since then I got a little trans-genre and worked in a little bit of fiction and a little bit of drama here and there. And while as a reader I continue to be rather genre fluid, my confession is that in fact I'm really cis-genre. Yes, which means you can still call me cis, but you'll have to spell it with a C. I am a fiction writer, and only a fiction writer. I know, it's a shock. That's just the way it is. I'm a fiction writer. And it so happens I have a book of short stories coming out under my pen name. And just as others have chosen pen names, Marianne Evans had her George Eliot, Charlotte, Emily, and Anne Bronte had their Currer, Ellis, and Acton Bell, and even Joanne Rowling went by J.K. to kind of throw the scent off of whether it's a man or a woman who has written the Harry Potter series. And even in her post-Potter days, she published a novel called The Cuckoo's Calling under the name Robert Galbraith. And even my dear, dear, dear Jane Austen published novels under a pseudonym. At least her first two novels, Sense and Sensibility and Pride and Prejudice, were published under the name A Lady. Well, I am no lady. My book is called Great Escapes from Detroit by Joseph O'Malley. And you may well wonder, well, why would Tootight Lautrec choose a pen name like Joseph O'Malley? Well, Joseph, obviously for the coat of many colors, and O'Malley after that great Irish pirate of lore, Grace O'Malley, who it's said that when she met with Queen Elizabeth I, they held their entire meeting in Latin because Grace refused to speak English and poor dumb Elizabeth I didn't know how to speak Irish, so they had to hold it in Latin. Grace O'Malley was also called the Queen of Connacht, and I have also been called a queen of things that begin with C and O and end with "ach." But it seems I veered off topic once again. Back to the matter at hand. Great Escapes from Detroit by Joseph O'Malley. Now, contrary to what you might think, this isn't a bunch of jokey stories that you might expect from a drag queen. They are stories that have been published in literary magazines, and they fall into the category literary fiction. And what's that I hear? Is that the great mass eye roll from the Booktube community about literary fiction? Perhaps it is, but literary fiction is a true category, and it just so happens that it's the category that my stories fall into. They're the type of stories that you might expect a nice handwritten, personalized rejection letter from the New Yorker, of which I have 3, and they are some of my most prized possessions. Now, I'm suspicious of writers who attempt to characterize their own writing, because that's really impossible to do. And I'm even more suspicious, and you should be too, of writers who say they are influenced by other great writers, and then they named the list of names. So I will never presume to say that I've been influenced by these writers, but to give you an idea of writers that I've read, and writers that I've loved, and writers that I've studied, I've compiled, just off the top of my head, a few names of short story writers who I absolutely adore. Herman Melville, James Joyce, Sherwood Anderson, John Cheever, Catherine Mansfield, Flannery O'Connor, J.D. Salinger, Tobias Wolff, George Saunders, Mary Gateskill, Joyce Carol Oates, Deborah Eisenberg, Joy Williams, Lydia Davis, Ron Rash, Steve Almond, and the list can go on, but these are the few that popped into my head as I was thinking about them today. It's a rather varied crowd, and I can claim no similarities to my own writing, but I will say that it's a party, if they had a party and all these writers went, it's a party that I would like to go to. Someone once said that if you are going to write, you should imagine yourself in the room with your heroes or your favorite writers, so that you can somehow absorb the maybe the competition of the excellence that for which they strove, and only hope that somehow it comes to rest on you in one way or another. I can't guarantee that that's happened, but let's hope. So you might be thinking, well, Tootight Lautrec, Joseph O'Malley, what's the deal, Mary? Well, my name's not Mary, but if you ever run into this Joe O'Malley fellow, he's going to try to convince you that he created me in a story called The Manly Man's Guide to Virtue, which was published in Glimmer Train, which is a literary journal. And by the way, he got $750 for it, so you're welcome, Joe O'Malley. But he says that he created me. And that story, The Manly Man's Guide to Virtue, doesn't appear in this collection, by the way. I have many other, if there are any agents out there, I have many other possible collections. I have another collection of stories that takes place in Detroit in the 1980s about one family that takes place in the year of the life during which the mother dies in a drunk driving accident. I have another book of stories that's all about gay men in New York. I have a novel about a gay bipolar sculptor who is born in Ireland in 1980 and dies in New York in 2007. And I'm currently working on another novel about gay mafia jewel thieves in 1960s New York. So that's what I'm working on. This particular book is different from that. But suffice to say, Joe O'Malley says that he created me, and I think, what nerve. I can't even. I will say this for him, though. He's got balls. I, Tootight Lautrec, am as real as the nose on Cher's face, and I won't even countenance the idea that he created me. But Great Escapes from Detroit is stories, 8 stories that are all about family stories that take place in, drum roll please, Detroit, because that happens to be where this, coincidentally, where Joe O'Malley was born and raised. And I won't read the description on the back, but I will read, to give you some idea, just one blurb. And this is a blurb from Lee Martin, who was a Pulitzer Prize finalist for his book, The Bright Forever. And he says, "The stories in Great Escapes from Detroit are luminous with what lesser writers miss. The magic and the splendor of the commonplace come alive." Which I think is very, very nice of Lee Martin to have said. So if you've been following me for years, you know that I am a bit of an attention whore, but I try not to beat my own drum very much. I beat other things, but not my own drum. I don't have a Patreon because I think that's kind of gross, and I've stopped asking people to like and subscribe and share because I find that's actually just silly, and who the heck cares? This is Booktube. If you want to watch it, and if you don't, don't. I'm happy to have you at the party, though, if you are here for the long haul. So what do I ask of viewers today? Well, if you bought the book, that would be great. You'll be helping out a small press, a small university press, and that would be wonderful. I would get a little bit, but not really very much. If you don't want to buy it, what I do ask is that you go to your local library, or a few of your local libraries, or your university library, or all of the above, and ask them to buy it and order it for you so that you can read it for free. And I have to admit, I have this silly little fantasy that started when I saw the movie Philadelphia Story with Katharine Hepburn and Cary Grant and Jimmy Stewart, where Katharine Hepburn plays this rich bitch who has divorced Cary Grant and is getting remarried, and a bunch of yellow journalists come in and attempt to TMZ her in a way and get the scoop on what's going on, and she's suspicious of them, and Jimmy Stewart is one such reporter, and they're at loggerheads through much of the film. And then at one point she says, "What's your real deal?" And he says, "Well, I am a writer. I've written a book of short stories." And she trots off to her local library, which has been founded by her grandfather, and she finds this book of stories, and she reads it, and it's a revelation to her. And she sees him in a whole new light, and I'm getting a little teary-eyed just even thinking about it, but that's been my fantasy ever since I can remember. So if you litter the world's libraries with my book, that would be just fine with me. Now, one other thing that you might do if you loved me, or even if you don't love me, I would ask, and now I'm going to need a little sustenance for this before I begin it, and I'm wondering if maybe you need some chips, because oh yes, well, there we go. I'm not opening up a can of worms. I'm probably opening up a can of snakes. So I would toss this over my shoulder, but I'd really rather not. I'd be more ladylike and set it down there. So I've opened up a can of snakes, and if you are a booktuber and you would deign to review it, I would really love that. If you're on Goodreads, I would love to hear a review or read a review on Goodreads about the book as well. Or in any other literary venue where people discuss books, the good, the bad, and the ugly, I ask you, if you could, to review it, as long as it's not a fluff piece. I do not require adoration. If you read it and hate it, or if you find that my prose is, as Sean the Book Maniac has said about other people's work, if you find my prose to be puke-worthy, go right ahead and say so, and tell me why. If you love it, all the better. I would love to hear that too, and I would love to hear why you love it. And if you think it's meh, then that's valid, and you can let me know that too, and let us know why. I am an adult, I'm an artist, and I can take constructive criticism and rejection. If I couldn't, I would have gotten out of the game long ago. So, if you're mean, will I hate you for the rest of your life and hope that your corpse rots in the stinking grave that you deserve? Well, if I do, I won't tell you, and I won't tell anyone else either, because I'm not that kind of queen. Laura Frey had a nice little video one time, and I'll provide a link to Sean's channel and to Laura's channel as well. She told this story about a writer who went on to Goodreads and argued with the people who gave her a negative review. And that is something that I will never, ever do. And not because I'm above it, mind, but because it's just so very unattractive, and I really can't risk it. So I'll never respond to a negative review. If you don't like it, I understand. I've got a full store of wine to shore me up in the choppy seas of criticism, and I can handle it. I am an adult. But if you do choose to buy it, I would appreciate it. It's published by a small university press, and you'll be helping that small press out. It's not the size that counts, I hear. But there it is, Great Escapes from Detroit by Joseph O'Malley. If you could, I'd appreciate it if you went to this Joe O'Malley character's Instagram at Joe O'Malley Fiction and show him a little love. Because although he'll try to convince you that he's not as much of an attention whore as I am, I think we know a little bit better than that. So, happy Split Personality Tuesday, or whatever day on which you're watching this video. If you are watching this video before the December 5th launch date, you won't be able to find a link here, but you can come back to the video and find it, or you can go to Joe O'Malley's Instagram page or my Instagram page or our Facebook pages, and you can find the links there after the 5th or the 6th, probably around December 10th. And you can buy it directly from Cornerstone Press, or perhaps there will be a link to Amazon. If you do go to Amazon, choose the Cornerstone Press store and buy it directly from them. And don't be frightened if in the few weeks you see me in a few videos in boy drag. This Joe O'Malley, he's not as thin as I am, nor is he as pretty, but he does his best, poor dear. So, I'll pick up my pen. We will be back to glitter and silliness and Shakespeare in the coming year. Probably, I'm hoping around February. I'm going to continue my Shakespeare sonnet series, and until we meet again in one costume or another. What's that? The world is full of what? It's full of wonder. That's right. Pay attention. I am Tootight Lautrec.